Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first lecture in this new term for the Technology and Future of Medicine course, Lab MP 590. It's a bit of an unusual course, as many of you know, and so I'd just like to go over a few parameters that are probably unlike any course you've attended before. We will always be in a room like this that holds 400. There'll never be more than 40 of us. So the best plan is for you to aggregate in one or two groups when you come in and close to the microphone. It gives us a much better impression on video than having you spread out all over the room. It's also better for you because you get to know the other students. You may wish that this class could be held in a really small room, so you'd be forced to be close to the other students. But the technology of the U of A is such that we're going to remain in a room like this because from the technology point of view, we have much more flexibility and bells and whistles and stuff in this room than we would in a room of more limited capacity. So that's one thing. The other thing is your human rights as a student. So this course, in theory, has 26 lectures, and they are all during this time period, from 2 to 3:20. But there are 12 of you taking the course for a grade. You're each going to give a 20-minute presentation with 10-minute discussion. So that means it would take 6 hours for your presentations, and it would take 6 class periods if we were to do it during regular class time. So what I'm proposing, and this is an imposition on you and something that has to be voluntary for you and individually voluntary. It can't just be a sort of democratic vote, but there can't be a single one of the 12 of you who's strongly opposed, right? It's more like anarchic governance than, democratic governance. So what it means is we're going to talk about this publicly here, but also privately. If any of you are really bothered by the ideas we have of how we're going to cope with the timing in this course, write to me, phone me, because I want to make sure, if we're going to have this special presentation session on March 2nd, Saturday, March 2nd, that you're all cool with that you're all fine with that. And if we're going to do a second similar session at the end of the course. So those would be mixed with fun, social, event kind of things, and hopefully reduce the stress that otherwise would exist if we had all the presentations during final exam time. But I want you to give some thought to this, and we will talk more about it. Now, you probably wondered what coming here would be like, and you may be feeling a bit anxious if you haven't been here before. And so I thought I would do something that will hopefully loosen you up a bit, and that is to have you listen to this YouTube video of a song that was written by a local singer-songwriter, Joel Crichton, who attended the course and wrote a song about the course. So let's try this. Here it comes, coming at you very soon.
I've got a half-life ticking and EKG readings that are beating the shore to dust. I've got a smartphone crystal ball, touch screen at all, but the screen won't touch. And it's this analog melody stuck in my head, and it's driving me insane, cause I got this chronic condition that'll suffer no remission, and I'm feeling that I ain't got time. Ooh yeah, yeah. Show me an android heart, an AI mind, and a spirit in the machine. Show me an optimistic and futuristic prognosis and what it means. Help me to see the future between the sutures. Will it be good or bad, or will we recognize a thing when we all pull the pin? Will it resemble what we had? It's a singularity. Yeah, it's a singularity. Beyond event horizon, will we wisen up or find a kind of glory? What's the story of the singularity?
What you hear is not a test, it's a singularity. A risk thing, isn't it? To envision it, or does the future look rather dissonant? Robot style, but what about later? Will it be like Terminator? Or are we headed for utopia? Well, follow me and I'll show ya.
Voices from every field across the world are coming to ya. Attend the class or watch from home, it's coming to ya. Kim Solez has the contacts and he's bringing them to ya. It's coming to ya, the future's coming to ya. So come to the future.
Technology and the future of medicine. Lab MP 590. Okay, so to formally begin the course, thank you for signing up for the course. Thank you for coming. You know that you're in two categories. Some of you are taking this course for a grade, and there are 12 of you in that category. And then some of you are taking it for continuous professional learning credit, which is much easier. There's no presentation for you. There's no paper for you. You can just come and show up and sign the attendance sheet and also take part in the discussion after the lecture. So we're in essence mixing something that's like a hospital rounds with something that's a regular university graduate course, for which undergraduates can also sign up if they're first interviewed by me. So some of you sitting here have had this traumatic experience of being interviewed by me, and you made it through and you're sitting in the seats. So that's some of the history of the course. The course is in part about the technological singularity, which is the idea of the merger of humans and machines, and is predicted to occur approximately 2045, so 32 years from now. And I would point out that most of you will still be active and around at that time, so talking about this future event is quite relevant to your life. It's not just a kind of theoretical thing, it's something that will actually impact you. And the evidence that something like this could happen, that machines are getting smarter than we are, there are lots of bits of evidence, but maybe nothing was terribly apparent before February 2011. And two things happened in that month. One was on the game show on TV, Jeopardy! A computer by the name of Watson beat the top human players, the top human contenders, in a progressive fashion where he got better and better over 3 days, making it apparent that this wasn't just a one-time thing, that he could now beat any human competitor. Computers were now better than human beings at the game of Jeopardy! And in Time magazine, there was an entire issue, a cover devoted to the technological singularity in the year 2045. And so both of these things occurred in the same month. And if it was sort of subliminal in our society, if people really didn't know about the singularity before that, then it became a kind of overt and relatively mainstream thing from that point on. And many other things have happened since February 2011 to make this idea of machines becoming smarter than we are and controlling the future agenda of the world a real thing, a thing you can actually envision happening. This course then began around that time. I began planning it in the spring of 2011. We did focus groups, one for undergraduates and one for graduate students, in May of 2011. You may know that at this university and most others, it takes 14 months from time of conception of a course until the time you can actually teach it. Well, that was way too slow for me. So we fast-tracked it. We found a lot of ways to kind of speed things up. So we began teaching the course as a continuous professional learning course in September of 2011, and we fast-tracked it as a graduate course. It was first taught as a graduate course in January 2012. The student input has been quite important here. Many of the idiosyncratic things about the way we run the course, for instance, the fact that it is open in principle to the general public, anybody can come and sit here, that's what the students suggested. And there are many other facets that also came directly from the input from the student focus groups. Another important thing for you to know is that I asked them early on whether we should protect them from the truth. Should we make the course balanced so there was more positive good news than negative bad news? And they said, no, Dr. Solez, we want you as much as possible to tell us everything and not to make any attempt to protect us from bad news. So some of the things we talk about in this course are kind of big and scary. The other and others are very utopian. So you get a lot of things to fantasize about that may actually happen on both the good and the bad side. And over time, the course sessions have developed a sort of rhythm. In the beginning, we had many ideas about how long the lecture should be and how we should handle discussion and breaking up into groups and all this sort of thing. But in the end, it came down to the usual pattern, which is that if I'm not the main lecturer, I give a 10-minute intro to the lecturer. The lecturer then speaks for 50 minutes, and there is a 20-minute discussion. Often the 20-minute discussion is no question the most exciting and rewarding part of the 80-minute teaching session. That means the students don't need a lot of incentive to come into this room. They realize they get a lot more out of this if they're here than if they aren't. It's true that we're shooting broadcast quality video, and you know many courses and many famous people teaching courses that shoot broadcast quality video. The number of students actually coming to the room plummets, so that they may have a course for 200. As soon as they start putting the video on the net, the number of people coming plummets to 20, 30, 40. And that's why, because the students say, you're actually better on video. But here, I think what you'll notice is the interaction as we actually talk together is rewarding enough that you'd like to be a part of that. And on the other hand, it's nice to know if you have to be out of town, if you have to miss something, you can still see it through the video. And the video, thanks to the excellent technical staff that we have, is of superb quality. And one of the reasons that we're in this room is because this kind of room is required to have the quality of video and audio that we end up with. You may wonder about the pictures from the course. This is a pretty good picture, eh? How would you get such a picture? Well, it would be hard. Are we going to tell Dr. Zian, well, we want you to pose with your hands over your head? Wouldn't it? I mean, that would look terribly contrived. It wouldn't be a very satisfactory picture. This is not a picture taken by a human being. This is a picture taken by a machine, right? A sentient machine. Comparing algorithms, it's actually this camera right here. comparing various shapes that it regards as pleasing for a picture to what's going on, and taking still pictures as it shoots video. That's how that picture was obtained, and many other of the finest still pictures. So you'll notice in many of the teaching sessions, we end up with really excellent still images where you don't see anybody taking pictures. And that's because this camera makes decisions, you know, look at that, that's perfect, let's go for it. And it's kind of interesting also, if you take this camera to some evening event and it's really unsatisfactory, nobody smiles, you may set it up in the picture and you don't get a single picture because the software decides there's nothing worthy of capturing here. So some of our classes we end up with a large number of pictures, maybe 100 or more, and I end up selecting some of them, and others we end up with relatively few. But it's just one example of the fact that things you regarded as a purely human activity, machines are becoming quite easily able to do. Our first teaching sessions were in the most uncomfortable, noisy room you can possibly imagine. The lighting was bad, the air handling was bad. The air handling was louder than any of the people speaking. So you always had this like rumble in the background. And so you can see over there on the left that those people don't look very happy, whereas you guys should be really happy because the air handling in this room is great and the lighting's great and so on. From every technologic point of view, you're in kind of an ideal circumstance for this course. And what has recently happened, I don't know, somebody mentioned Gangnam Style, the video that now has over 1 billion hits. Concurrent with making that guy the visual theme for YouTube, YouTube has made another change which has benefited us very much. In the description of any YouTube video, if you put a time in, like 10.00, it will automatically hot link that time. So you can do a full table of contents of exactly what's going on in the video. Somebody can look at that, see something of interest to them, click on that hot linked time and go directly to that part of the video. That saves us, because if you think of the videos in this course, who would ever want to watch an 80-minute video? That's ridiculous, right? I mean, well, it's not absolutely ridiculous, but there are certainly times when you do not want to do that. Whereas you may be interested in something hidden there, but you're certainly not going to watch the whole video to find it. So this fact that YouTube now in 2013 has this ability to hot link the table of contents makes our videos much more useful than they would otherwise be. And within the next 4 to 6 weeks, we will have those hot linked table of contents for every single video from this course. We have a diverse faculty. In most courses that you take, the faculty teaching the course are in a subtle way competing with each other. They're from the same sector of the university, maybe the same department. And so some of the things that we do in this course, like asking the students to critique the lectures, you could never do that. Because in a usual course, if a whole bunch of students critiqued one of the professor's lecturers, his status vis-a-vis the other lecturers would go down and it would just be a terrible thing. But here, we're so diverse. Nobody really is competing with anyone else in this course. We have people teaching from the faculty of arts, science, medicine, and people with very different job descriptions. We have people who are still in residency training at the Faculty of Medicine, and yet they're your age, so they're in a sense your peers, but they've done awesome stuff. They have quite a remarkable story to tell. So Shauna Pena. It is the approximate age of most of you in this room, and similarly Abdullah Salah. They're a part of the faculty of this course, but they're not a part of the faculty generally. They are residents in surgery. But you'll find them just as rewarding, and those sessions are just as valuable, if not more so, than the others in the course. So it's a very, very diverse course. When Heather Graves first joined us, I think she believed she had gotten into the course by accident, and we would never, ever keep her. That it was some sort of crazy accident. She ended up teaching in this course, and we would get rid of her in the first instance. But instead, at a time when we had very few students taking the course for a grade, some of them used her as their mentor for the final project, and she has been just as important as the other faculty. So that's another important thing to realize. Those of you who've been to the website for the course know that the main video you encounter there is Jonathan White's lecture on technology and the body. And that is arguably the best lecture series that we've had in the course. But what you probably wouldn't realize from the website is that lecture also began with a song. But unlike the song that the song that I began this lecture with, I actually own the rights to, right? So that's different. The song that Jonathan White began with, he doesn't own the rights to, and so we could not have it remain. And so as good as that video is, you can imagine that actually sitting there in the seats, the experience was even better, because you got the song plus the rest of that lecture. The pilgrimage. Many of the people showing up in this room who work with me at the hospital walk a very long distance to get here. Dr. Zakis. And it's good exercise. There's an indoor path to do that throughout the year, even when it's minus 40 outside. It's always possible to get here. But we at first thought that this was just an aberration, that we're on the other side of the campus from the medical school, but now we realize that from a technology point of view, there's strong argument that we should stay here, and we will. So you have a lot of people who have taken quite a journey to get here. They walked from the extreme one end of the campus to the other to be present. But if you want to do this, they're quite interesting people to make that trip with. So the course specifics, we're shooting broadcast quality video of each lecture and discussion. Now, is it always broadcast quality? Well, it depends upon the behavior of the lecturer. If the lecturer is a very excitable person moving all around, then you notice that the backdrop here contains many distractions. And if I were to zip this way and that way, suddenly the quality of the video would be much less good. So we don't always end up with broadcast quality video, but we always end up in a circumstance where we could have done it if the lecturer had behaved. So anyway, the previous lectures are in 2 channels on YouTube, Kim Solez and Avoca 99. And we, in the past, have asked you to critique past lectures as part of the assignment in the course. We would ask you this time also to help us fine-tune the hot-linked table of contents. So if there's some awesome quote or something you think is really memorable about that video that's not in the table of contents, tell us about it. So we can fix it and make the table of contents even more useful than it is right now. The other part of your grade, so that's 20%, the critique of the past lecture. Then you write approximately 3,000 word paper for 40% and give a 20-minute presentation on the same basic subject as a part of the course. And that's worth 30%. Now, At the student presentation evening we had on December the 4th, I would have anticipated, because it went from 5 to 10 p.m., that the students would be really eager to get out of there. You know, when is this going to end? But instead, as the evening got later, they decided they wanted to talk with me in detail about the course and make some suggestions. And one of the things that they suggested very strongly is that 10% of the grade should be based on class participation. That's such an important part of the course. Now, what if we get a shy student? If we get a shy student, we'll have an online forum. You're not absolutely required to speak, but I think many of you will find this is a useful course, because if you're going to do anything important in the future, you need to be able to speak into a microphone. And in this class, you'll have a lot of opportunity to do that. Because to make a comment, the way to do that is to go to a microphone and speak into it. And that's very good practice for anything else of high impact that you may wish to do in your life. There's no required reading. There's suggested reading. But I wanted to say there's also kind of a tradition of sharing books. And so I brought 4 books today, if any of you want to take any of these away. So I've just finished this one, which is David Brin's Existence. So I'm kind of paced to read one science fiction book a year, which is not a very fast pace. The one I read last year was Robo-Apocalypse, which, as you know, is being made into a Steven Spielberg movie that'll be out in 2014. And then I have 2 copies of The Singularity is Near by Ray Kurzweil. One is paperback, and the other is an autographed copy of the hardback. So if any of you want to read any of these, you can borrow them, and there are others taking the course who also bring books here that they will let you borrow. So you don't need to feel resentful of the high cost of purchasing the books for this course. You don't necessarily have to purchase anything for this course. The course content, as I said, is about many things, but it really is about technology and the future of medicine, and it really is about the technological singularity, that point in time when machines are smarter than we are and begin to take over the agenda of the world, and we can then only understand what's going on and only have an influence on it if we combine or merge with them in some way. We talk about existential risks, AI, genomics, and nanotech, ways to optimize a positive outcome for humanity in this coevolution of humans and machines, and the influence of these considerations on the medicine of the future. What do you think medicine means? May seem like a stupid question, right? I mean, you all know what medicine is, but don't you, in your mind, think of disease immediately? Medicine has to do with disease. But if you think about it for a moment, if that's true, then medicine's going to disappear, right? Because we'll reach a point where we'll be able to prevent or immediately treat most of the existing diseases that we know today. The other thing that medicine can do is enhance human capabilities, make us run faster, think better, be taller, look better, all those sorts of things. And even after we eliminate all of the present human disease, there will still be the possibility of doing that. The other thing, even more important, is the social responsibility of medicine. Do physicians have a responsibility of somehow helping society to heal in general, rather than just treating individual diseases? And as I'll talk about later, I think that they do. So thinking about medicine that way, medicine is very broad. So those of you who, without a medical background, will find it remarkable that you're able to understand virtually every lecture in this course. What does that mean? That we're not really talking about medicine? No. I think that we're thinking about medicine as something very broad that also includes things like the enhancement of human capabilities and the improvement of society in general. Last term we had the Dean of Science and the Dean of Arts speaking. This term I believe we'll have the Dean of Science. We try to have a very balanced view. I think a course like this that was all pro-technology, that included no technology skeptics, would be really very limited in value, because that's not the real world. So we have made a very clear attempt to incorporate technology skeptics into the course. So no matter how infrequently you check your email, these are people who check it even more infrequently than that. They may walk around for long times without any electronic devices in their pockets. It's amazing that there still are people like that, but they are, and some of them are teaching in this course. So we have the full spectrum from people who are very technologically connected to people who really are regarding themselves as representatives of the traditional way that life for human beings used to be before technology started to take over. So let's get back again to your human rights and how we're going to conduct the course. So Joel Crichton, who, if you didn't know about him before, you know a little bit about him now from the music video that I played. What I'm suggesting is that we would have a musical performance by him to celebrate this future day on March 1st, which is a Friday, and the next day in the next venue, you would do your student presentations. We don't have to do it like that. We don't have to use Joel Crichton. I think if you had a suggestion of some other young performer, I think it would have to be somebody young, have to be somebody approximately your age, but otherwise, I'm open, and I'm also open to suggestions for the future. Even if you completely accept what I'm suggesting here for March 1st, I'd like you to also think about the students of the future and how you think we could make this work. You can imagine that the student numbers in this course are going to continually go up, and that has real implications. I think this will be the last term when all of you will hear all the student presentations. I think if we predict the next time we'll have, say, 27 students, then the students should not be forced to go to all of the student presentations. They can if they wish, but they probably would not want to. And when we get up to the maximum of the course of 40, I think the students would obviously not want to go to all of the student presentations. So I think this time, where there's still only 12 of you, you all can go to all of the student presentations, but that probably won't be the case in the future. You may not like Wunderbar or Artery. You may want to suggest somewhere else. I'm saying that I'm messing with your rights as a student by asking you to lengthen the time you're devoting to this course, and therefore you should have real input into this. I can make, default decisions for you, but I want to make sure, number one, that what we do is okay with all of you, and number two, that we do it in what seems to you like the optimal way. So I think, I'm not sure, but I think there's kind of a formula for our own exponential now, the number of students in this course. So in January we had 2. In the fall we had 5. Now we had 12. So I think what it is each time we double plus 1, double plus 2, double plus 3. So if we do double plus 3 for the next semester, that would give us 27, and would mean the semester after that will be up to the maximum of 40. I don't know for sure that that's going to happen, but I think that it might. So you can imagine that it could eventually seem like this particular semester that you're taking this course was a pretty good semester to take it. That you were more, you got a more concentrated experience, you were less, diluted out by the other students, and that you got to hear absolutely every presentation in the course. So that's kind of how I see it going. As we become more and more successful, students will not be listening to all the other student presentations, and there may be other things that we need to change. Now, as you know, probably the university has signed a memorandum of understanding with Udacity, and Udacity does online courses, online video teaching, and I think they have the most technologically advanced online teaching. And I imagine that eventually, somehow, I don't know exactly how, there'll be a relationship between what we're doing in this course and the MOU that the university has signed with Udacity. There's one thing that Udacity does that we don't do yet, but that I'm aiming for us to do at least by the fall of 2013, and that is teaching using a graphics tablet. You'll see a lot of their videos are really entrancing. You have this transparency effect where you see the person's hand writing and things superimposed as a sort of mixed reality on top of that. So I want to find lecturers who are able to do that and to be as capable of doing that in this course as you see in the standard Udacity videos. Okay, there's always a problem in these particular subjects with audience heterogeneity. Some of you have known about the technological singularity for a long time and have a certain command of the understanding of it. Others of you are just hearing about it today and really don't have a clue what it means, and they're really kind of anxious about that. So what do we do about this heterogeneity? And the fact is that these are subjects that matter to young people. I think that's one thing I'm going to keep reiterating, that all of humanity has a stake in the things that we're talking about, but particularly young people. So it's worth trying to find out about these things. I think if we pick people to talk about that are relatively unknown, they'll be relatively unknown for all of you. And so that makes it, put you all on an equal footing. And so I'd like to tell you a bit about Marcus Hutter and Rebecca Kendrick. Marcus Hutter, I don't know if any of you have watched Jonathan Schaefer's videos from his lecture last term. But one of the things that he said is that Marcus Hutter's presentation was extremely complicated and that he was going to make things way easier and just have fun, because he had to imagine that the intellectual challenge of Marcus Hutter's presentation was really quite considerable. Well, it depends upon how you look at it. First of all, you're going to get it multiple times. When I speak on Thursday, I'm going to present some of the material from what Marcus Hutter will be presenting to you later on. It's sort of very surprising reality of what will the technological singularity really be like? What will it feel like? How will it compare to the feelings you have as a young person today? What will it look like? What will it sound like? What is the tangible nature of the technological singularity as well as we can understand it? Well, if you look at the slides in his PowerPoint, you'll be able to understand what he's saying in every single slide easily. But if you look at the rationale behind what he's saying, it may take you days, months, weeks, years to understand why he's saying what he's saying. So depending upon which one of these matters more, whether you just want to know what he's saying or why he's saying what he's saying, then the intellectual challenge is either enormous or not too bad. I would like you all to feel as you've been exposed to this. His name is becoming known. When I started talking about him in this course, it was honestly true that nobody, not even in the AI field in this hemisphere anyway, had heard of him, but now people have heard of him more and more. He has recently authored an essay called "Can Intelligence Explode?" and I would recommend that you read that. Rebecca Kendrick is an artist and a philosopher from New York City. She's your age, she's 24. And she's advised me on some of the presentations in this course that have to do with what it's like to be a young person today. What is what's the sort of the feeling of that? How empowered or unempowered or what is relevant to young people today? And I have to believe that is an important part of the course. Now, when you think about disseminating ideas, how many people could we ultimately try to reach with the ideas in this course? Well, it depends upon how you look at it. But I would say we're reaching only a very tiny fraction of the people that we could reach. So let's just talk about numbers for a moment. The videos from the course seem to max out around 1,300 now. I think Jonathan White's video of his first lecture is 1,300 something. Most of them are around 900. The Singularity Summit, which is the best known meeting about the technological singularity, the videos from it max out around 9,000. Now, how many human beings are there out there that might be interested in this stuff? Well, the Big Bang Theory, which you know never talks seriously about science, it's just for fun, but presumably it's a kind of fun. The people who find that enjoyable are people who are interested in the general subjects we're talking about in this course. How many of them are there? Well, in the US alone, there's 16 million people watching the Big Bang Theory, and worldwide it's about 30 million. Then if you go to the PBS program NOVA, there are 100 million people watching that. So right now, we're reaching with our videos from this course about 1,000 people, and there are 100 million, I think, who could conceivably be interested in this stuff. So we have a bit of a challenge in terms of reaching people. One of the students last term wrote about that, wrote about how do we make a pitch to NOVA to have them do a program about us. So you know, it is practical to think about that. So one of the things that's a bit scary, I think, about Marcus Hutter's ideas of the future is this whole element of human insignificance. You know, people talk about unfriendly AI. How can we make sure that the sentient machines are friendly toward us? But if you think about, as you walked here today, there may have been some, you know, insect on the ground, an ant or something that you walked past. It doesn't really matter whether you felt friendly or unfriendly toward the ant. You didn't probably feel either one. The ant didn't matter. It wasn't significant in your life, right? So that might be the problem, that the machines will be so much smarter than we are that what we do just won't matter to them. And that would be, in a sense, a much greater problem than this idea of them being unfriendly. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. So what Marcus Hutter says is that there could be a kind of similarity between the dysphoria that a lot of young people feel today and what it will be like for everybody then. So one of the ideas about this is a lack of empowerment in the world, right? That you're not really sure that you're significant. Therefore, you may engage in extreme risk-taking because you're not sure that you really count for anything in the world. This can be a thing that's a part of the dysphoria of being a young person, but right now you get over it, right? Because at some point you say, well, gee, I do count for something, and this extreme risk-taking doesn't make sense anymore but suppose that everybody in the world, all human beings, had this feeling of being really, truly insignificant, no longer controlling any part of the agenda in the world, then we'd be stuck in this kind of eternal youth. Lack of identity would also be a problem then. If most of the important ideas in the world come from machines or have been enhanced by them, would assigning a human being's name to them mean anything? So if you start something, but then it's enhanced very much by machines and probably no longer recognizable as yours, then your own identity no longer counts for as much as it once did. So there may be very few incentives to keep identities straight when biological brains are contributing so little to mental processes. So this would lead to an aimlessness, lack of sense of purpose. So is there something we can do about this? Yes, there obviously is. I think that one of the purposes of this course is not to just leave you with a lot of bad news about stuff that's going to happen, but to say we're not passive victims of the future. You and the others sitting in these seats can be amongst the people who help shape the future. You can change things. There are various paths that the future can go along. You can determine which of those paths are the ones that we actually follow. And we need to get the public talking about this. We need to make it mainstream within the universities that we are talking about this. And so this course is a beginning attempt to achieve this. So where does this course fit into the great scheme of singularitarian things in the world? Well, a month ago, that would have been very difficult to describe to you and probably very boring to go through all the complexities, but suddenly it's become very easy because the Singularity University has taken over most of the other entities. And they haven't taken over us. So anyway, we're one of the few independent singularitarian entities out there at the moment. And most of the others are becoming part of this Singularity University monolith. Now they trained me. I took their nine-day executive course. I still have interactions with them. But it's kind of interesting how they're a beneficial for-profit company. In California, as you know, there is such an entity. There are regular for-profit companies that are just in it for the money. Then there are for-profit companies who are trying to make money while doing good things in the world. So that's the category that they are currently in, and they're buying up, taking over many other entities. Now, when I said earlier that machines are becoming smarter than we are and taking over the agenda of the world, you may have thought, well, that's not true at all. But if you have an iPad or an iPhone or any sort of device, it very likely was made in a Foxconn factory in China. And do you know that in November of 2012, it was announced that Foxconn is replacing 1 million workers with 1 million robots, and they've already started to do that. The first 10,000 robots have already arrived. They're working. The process will be complete in 2 years. So by 2015, there will be only about 200,000 people working for Foxconn and 1 million robots. And this is just, I mean, it's only one example, but it's an example that I think will make you go, huh, well, you know, that's something. You know, that's not nothing, that's something. And most of you are using every day something that was made in one of those Foxconn factories. And pretty soon when you get a new one, that will have been constructed by robots in that factory. And when you get back to thinking about medicine, we could eliminate all disease and still have a terrible, terrible world. We could eliminate all the diseases that we've known of in the past, absolutely every one of them, and have more diseases than we've ever had, because all the diseases that were left would be those of bioterrorism, made particularly to be ones where there is no antidote, there is no treatment. And so there's a lot that we can do to try to assure a positive outcome for humanity. So what will medical careers be like in 2045? I've talked about the possible influence of bioterrorism as possibly the only thing still creating disease at that time. Stem cell technologies may be ubiquitous. We may be making organs from stem cells for every conceivable application. The focus of medicine would be no longer disease, but enhancement. But that's not just physical enhancement. It would go toward moral enhancement too, making people morally better. And then this idea of the social responsibility of medicine. That's one of the focuses of this course. Now look at this quote and think about this quote. When you see this quote elsewhere from Rudolf Virchow, you see it with a different picture. You see it with a picture of Virchow as an old man. But the fact is that when he wrote these words, he was 27. He was the same age that you are more or less today. And in fact, most Virchow quotes were quotes of things that he wrote in that era when he was still in his 20s. And what was he writing about? It's the curse of humanity that it learns to tolerate even the most horrible situations by habituation. Physicians are the natural attorneys of the poor, and the social problems should largely be solved by them. So this has to do with the social background of health, the fact that things in society lead to problems of health. But if you think about a physician's responsibility that way, then doctors will always have something to do. It's a very big role, right? And so that's one of the ways in which we can justify the claim that every single lecture in this course is related to medicine, because in some way it is related to this social responsibility of medicine. I would point out that this course, as far as we know, is absolutely unique. And you can say, well, that's good for you, Dr. Solez. I would ask you to think about what it means for you. I think it should have advantages for you that you're taking a course where there is no other course like this in the whole world. But you can imagine that someday there'll be many, many courses like this. It will be mainstream. It will be realized that people need to be talking about these subjects. So we have a bit of a window during which we are absolutely unique. And I'd like you to help me think this through from the student's point of view. How do we make use of that fact? How do we enhance what you're getting out of this course? to make it the most valuable possible experience that it could be. There is another book that I would recommend you reading, which is Peter Diamandis's Abundance. I also want you to be aware of the idea of the reversal of aging, not just stopping aging, but reversing it. Many of you are aware of the fact that probably people will be able to live to very advanced age. But is this just a wrinkled prune scenario, right? You know, you can think of a very, very old, very, very old looking person. No, I think that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a very old, young looking person. That is really what we're postulating, young, functioning person. We need to consider the possibility of a post-scarcity world, what medicine would be like in a situation where everything that you want, you can actually have. You probably never conceived of that being possible, but you can imagine a situation where virtual reality is as good as real reality, and therefore any experience you want to have, you can have. And where the automation of the world, the creation of things by robots, by machines has made everything so cheap that the things that you require, that you regard as being out of your reach at the moment, you'd be able to easily have them. Okay, well that's a wonderful utopian idea. Will there be a gap? Will there be a gap where first robots take over all our jobs, people are starving, human beings go through something absolutely terrible, and then maybe 10 to 15 years later, we come to this post-scarcity world of abundance where everything's there, you can have whatever you want. That wouldn't work, would it? So one of the fascinating things you'll find in this course is when you hear from an individual lecturer, often the story they're telling you is very convincing. And so you walk out of the room thinking, boy, they really understand the way the world is better than anyone else I've ever met. That's fantastic. But then the next teaching session, you may find somebody who's equally convincing in the entirely opposite way. And so, for instance, if you look on YouTube at James Hughes's lectures in this course, he's certainly from the Skype, the external side, he's probably the best lecturer we've had. Some of those lectures are extremely convincing, but what you will find is that there are other lecturers who are equally convincing on the other side. So is there a gap? Are we facing this idea of first everybody losing their jobs and things just being terrible because of machines taking over most ordinary functions? Or is everything going to work in steps, so you lose a relatively uninteresting job, you get a much more interesting one, and meanwhile everything you want is becoming more accessible and cheaper and so on? We honestly don't know, but I think maybe one of the most interesting facets of this course is the way that your ideas will go back and forth about such things. And so what you can honestly say is for certain, we're learning about the way the future will be in this course. We just don't know which story about it is going to be the accurate one. But I think as you live the future in the future, you will realize that some of what you're living then will be exactly what we predicted in this course. But of course that means that some of the predictions in this course will be absolutely wrong because some are conflicting. But I think it's still a useful exercise to have this experience of scenarios, and so that's what a lot of this course is. Moore's law, you will learn about this, the exponential change. And it doesn't really apply completely in medicine for a lot of reasons. Regulatory oversight is more completely focused on compliance. Healthcare doesn't have the same financial rewards, and so on. And so it's not simple. Thinking about exactly what will happen with the future of medicine. And I think that's one of the exciting things about this course. Even those of you who are not in medicine, it's really interesting figuring out, well, honestly, how will this impact on medicine? That's obviously of importance to us all. And there's some real surprises. You know, there are many apps. Many of you, if you have an iPad or an iPhone, you have many apps. I have hundreds of apps. On my iPad, I have only 4 medical apps, and I'm only using one of them. And this is very common, that there are many, many medical apps that sound good that apparently no one is using. And so people, there's a complete out of syncness with the people making these apps and the people who would conceivably use them. And it's just one of the many surprises when you apply technology in medicine. As many of you know, I'm a pathologist. Pathologists use microscopes. We're very good at making small things big. But I think in this course, we also need to do the opposite. We need to take the really big picture and make some sense of this really big picture of what the future is going to be. So that's what we're also trying to do in this course. Not just get great detail about a very tiny thing, but to try to come up with some ideas of how it could work to have these future exponential changes applied to medicine. So I would ask for your help to figure out how to capture the imagination of the public, to start everybody thinking about these matters. And we need people to understand that the technological singularity is fact, not fiction. And we need to promote organized thinking about the future in the universities and beyond. So that's all I had to say today. We have 9 minutes for questions. You can go to the microphones in the hall, in the aisles here. Surely there must be questions. No one has a question? David, yes.
Thank you very much. That was a really great introduction. I'm just wondering how the concept of artificial intelligence, singularity, etc., will deal with perhaps the most pressing problem of our age in terms of ecological destruction and the changing environment with climate change and all the various ramifications and other things that are happening in the environment, which could impact all of this so much to maybe not allow it to happen in the future.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the fascinating things is the simple idea of peak oil. It's amazing to me that people would still think of the world so simplistically. You know, you can look at the rate at which we're consuming oil, how much oil there is, the fact that we're going to run out, and that we're obviously going to start fighting with each other, kill each other off, and that will be the end of society for human beings. On the other hand, there's enough solar power reaching the Earth like every minute to fulfill all the needs that we have for a year. There's a tremendous multiplier there between the solar power we receive and what our actual worldwide energy needs are. So if you factor things like that in, then obviously it doesn't matter that we obviously are going to run out of oil at some point, because we will have alternatives. can even show that these alternatives are becoming cheaper. So, on the one hand, I think it's fascinating to look at that. On the other hand, when we talk about existential risks, almost all of them contain the idea of the wild card, the unexpected thing that could happen. And almost every one of them, nanotech, biotech, artificial intelligence, so on, there is a conceivable scenario that could wipe out all of the human race before any of these wonderful things that we've talked about can possibly happen. Is it all preventable? Well, no, it's not all preventable, so some of it's going to depend on luck. But I think the other thing is, by studying existential risk, we become more able to deal with and lessen these risks, but we won't be lessening them to zero. So is it possible that the singularity is theoretical because we will never get there? That is possible. And when the focus groups told me not to protect you, to tell you everything, this is one thing to tell you, that this is one outcome. But it's probably about as likely as is the pure utopian outcome, where we'll rapidly get to post-scarcity utopia where everybody has everything that they want. Probably both of those things are quite unlikely, but not of zero likelihood.
Thank you. I think the issue of peak oil and the discovery of new sources of oil, that's only going to contribute to some of the atmospheric problems and things like that, like the rising oceans. But there are so many other things, but I guess what I'm wondering is, how is singularity and how is the power of the computer and artificial intelligence combining with our intelligence, is it being put to use to deal or to focus on any of these giant environmental issues? Do you know from any of those books? And
yeah, I think it is. I would point out that there's a magazine called The Futurist. It is mainly probably the main publication out there dealing with these future issues. And it quite regularly talks about environmental, catastrophes and the sorts of things that you're talking about. Global warming, rising levels of the oceans, flooding many cities and so on. As we'll talk about in the AI lectures, you can't just say, well, what's AI being applied to? Is it being applied to global? AI is being applied to everything. When it's successfully applied, we don't call it AI any longer. So AI becomes the term until it's an integral part of something, and then it's just called a part of whatever it's become a part of. So yes, artificial intelligence is being applied to the problems that you mentioned, as it is to all other human problems. Are there other questions? Yeah, would you like to, there's a microphone in the aisle back there.
Hi. I was just curious as to your prediction on no disease, as we see disease at the moment. Is that something that you are expecting to happen, and is it anywhere near this 2045 prediction of singularity occurring? Because in my experience, disease is publicized as how effective current medicines are at treating it, but what is actually occurring doesn't really reflect what is being publicized.
I'm not quite sure I get your point, but I think the simple answer is that There are a lot of common diseases that kill us off quite regularly: heart disease, stroke, cancer. And one can imagine that within the next 30 years, we will have solved all of them. That doesn't mean, as I said, that there won't be as many diseases as there are now, but that they would be man-made at that point. But you can imagine that we could eliminate most human disease. It's not a particularly important part of the arguments in this course. If you're strongly opposed to that, that's fine. I think you know, you can show that a lot of medical advances are being made. It depends on where you look, how much the average person benefits from those. In the developed world, the average person benefits a lot. In the developing world, there are still large parts of the world that have no medical care whatsoever. So they are not benefiting at all from modern medical technology. And one of my other projects, we've started a new medical school in Kathmandu, Nepal, devoted to rural health, devoted to providing medical care to parts of the country that basically didn't have any, where those people didn't see a physician their entire lives. And so, yeah, there's great heterogeneity in that, in the degree to which the practice of medicine is getting better and diseases are being eliminated. Are there other questions?
Thank you.
So it's time. There'll be another 400 students probably come cascading in here in 9 minutes, so we have to get out of the way. It'll be trampled to death. So thank you for coming, and I'll see you on Thursday. And you can send me an email if you wish to deal with this issue, what we're going to do on March 1st and 2nd, and how we're going to handle the presentations in the course. Your view on that counts, and I do want to hear from you about it. Okay, thank you.